All right, an assistant professor, his name is Ayman Azim, is at the Salk Institute. He's been awarded the NIH, National Institutes of Health, Director's New Innovator Award. He got a $1.5 million grant. He joins me now to talk more about that. Nice to have you here, Doctor.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so the National Institutes of Health is always trying to do some interesting things. Tell me about the grant process and why you.
The grant process, NIH is the main mechanism of funding for researchers in fields like mine, biomedical research. And so generally what we do is we put together ideas, we apply, they're reviewed by other scientists, these grants, and then you cross your fingers and you hope that your ideas get funded.
Now, a lot of high-risk kind of projects that yours might fall into that category don't get funding because it's difficult. You're not going to get always the expected result. Tell me why NIH invests in something that's as high-risk as what you were talking about.
Well, NIH has created a few programs that they call high risk, high reward to sort of take chances on big ideas, things that if they pay off will have a very big impact on the field. And so they've created a few mechanisms, and I applied for one of them as soon as I arrived at the Salk Institute and was fortunate enough to receive it.
Okay, so tell me what your project is and why is it high risk?
So generally my lab is interested in movement. If you think about it, the only way that you can interact with the world and translate your desires into action is by sending signals from your brain to your body, cause your muscles to contract and to move. And we focus in particular on skilled movements. You were mentioning dexterous movements earlier, of your arms, your hands, your fingers. And we understand very little about how our brain is able to coordinate such complex movements. And so what's high risk about this is what we try to do is we take an approach where we try to take the system apart. Kind of like if you want to understand how your car works, you need to understand how each piece works.
Right.
Now the problem with the brain is it's so complex we don't even know what all the pieces are. So what we're trying to do is dismantle, disentangle the complex jungle of neural circuits in the brain and in the spinal cord to try to figure out how we coordinate these types of movements.
So by learning that, does that help, like, for example, the creation of a robot that might mimic human movement?
Sure. It has all kinds of implications. We're really interested in is figuring out how the system fundamentally works, and what we think is by having a better understanding of how the brain controls movement, we're going to be in a much better place to diagnose motor disorders and try to eventually repair motor dysfunction after injury or disease.
Okay, so like if you're injured and you're suddenly unable to use your arms or your legs or your fingers, you can kind of deconstruct that and then attack it?
Yeah, that's the idea. So the few treatments that we do have for neurodegenerative diseases and injuries right now, a lot of them are based on a fundamental basic science understanding of how the nervous system works. One example is something called deep brain stimulation treatment for Parkinson's disease. Long story short, they can implant electrodes in a very specific part of the brain, and in the patients where it works really well, as soon as you turn on the electrode, the tremor disappears. And the reason that works is because of years of research of trying to understand the neural circuits in the brain, how they connect to each other, how they communicate with each other, and that's how they identified the location where they should put that electrode. So that's just one of many examples.
You mentioned the brain and how complex it is. So where do you start? Do you start there, or do you start with a single nerve? How does that process begin with your $1.5 million that you're going to be doing to the study? Tell me what that starting point would be.
So where we like to start in my lab is as close to the output, as close as the movement as possible.
Oh, okay.
The only output of your nervous system that allows you to move are things called motor neurons. They're the neurons that leave your nervous system and connect to your muscles, cause your muscles to contract. Okay. So we try to start there and work our way backwards in these really complex circuits to try to figure out how they all work together to orchestrate complex movements.
So what have you found so far?
So far, we've been looking at a lot of different things, but one of the things I'm most excited about is we're finding these circuits in the brain that when they send signals or commands to cause you to move, they send copies of these signals, what we call internal copies, to your brain to keep you aware of what you're about to do, and we think that allows you to make predictions as you're moving of to happen, so you can make really rapid corrections.
Redundant predictive movements?
So that you can make predictive corrections of what's about to happen, and that allows you to move more quickly, more precisely. So that's the idea, and what we're trying to do is get into the nervous system and try to figure out if these copies are actually able to allow you to make more precise movements.
Wow, the implications are pretty far-reaching. Well, we wish you the best of luck with this research.
Thank you.
Come back and give us a report on what you've accomplished, because this is really interesting stuff.
Thank you very much.
All right, Doctor, thanks so much for being here with us this morning, and good luck with that.